Welcome back to another Gruber Motor Company podcast. I'm your host, Pete Gruber, and my co-host, Esperanza Valladares.
Hello.
And today we're going to start the session with our Tesla Roadster newsletters. The reason that we started the newsletters around 2014 or so was we realized that the same Tesla Roadster questions surfaced on Tesla Motors Club, TMC, Facebook sites, and customer inquiries. The early topics for the newsletters were tires, paint codes, for example. What do the error codes mean? Certain aging issues with the Tesla Roadster, charging questions, what to do when a Roadster gets bricked, which is actually our most popular newsletter, and the diagnostic screen functions. What do they mean? How do you access the screen? So this gets me into another discussion. There is a secret password in a Tesla Roadster and firmware that for many years was only accessible to the Tesla gurus at the service centers. This password was never given out to customers, and it reveals an enormous amount of data about the car. It's constantly logging and doing basic checks on the car. It had been recommended that owners stay out of this section of the Roadster, and only the experts at the service centers be allowed into this hallowed section of the firmware. One of the first things that we did was we publicized this password so owners also have access to the deeper recesses of their car. So many of these cars by then were out of warranty. The service needs were often taken care of by customers. And for example, the maintenance due notification that pops up periodically, letting you know that you need to do your annual PM. If you've done your own PM, preventive maintenance, which I did on my Roadster, I didn't know how to clear it without password access. So our release of this password was initially controversial, created quite a stir, but it proved to be way overdue and a very popular move. Essentially, to access the password, and we'll see a newsletter here shortly, you click in a non-interactive screen or portion of the VDS screen, vehicle display screen, that small little 3.5-inch screen, a number of times, and a password screen will pop up. The top secret password is 1050, and it was derived from Tesla's first location in San Carlos at 1050 Bing Street, which, by the way, if you Google it, is shut down now.
Oh, really?
Yes. So the newsletters were quite popular. We were publishing them once a month for a while, and we've currently stopped We've stopped the publication because our YouTube videos have really taken over that type of content, and we find that the videos are far more sophisticated than what we could jam into a newsletter.
Right, and more informational as well.
Exactly.
And so this password, what does it allow you to do on that VDS screen?
There's actually a newsletter that talks about that.
Okay.
Once you get in it, there are an enormous amount of features that reveal what's going on under the hood in the Tesla.
Is this something that was meant to be shared with every Roadster owner? Is it like in an owner's manual, or is this something that was just for the Tesla service centers and then they...
Only for the Tesla service centers initially.
Huh.
And the owners were not provided this password. It was nowhere in the user manuals or in any of the documentation. So again, it was pretty controversial when we said, hey, you know what? Let's make this public. And we weren't sure what kind of repercussions would result from that. And of course, there were the few naysayers initially,
right,
as there always will be, but the response was actually overwhelming,
right,
in favor of making that available to the owners of the cars.
Okay. Did we get any repercussions from the service center or from Elon Musk or anybody?
No one at Tesla complained a bit. It was way overdue.
Okay.
The grumblings usually come from the peanut gallery on
Right.
the social media sites.
And I think at this point, I mean, considering that there aren't many Roadster technicians at the service center, I think they don't even have a clue of what this, what this code is. So considering that, now Roadsters owners are able to get this information without having to rely on the service center, I think it's a lot of help just because, I mean, there aren't many Roadster technicians out in the service centers anymore. They're very, very minimal.
In all fairness to Tesla, they do know about this password access, and they do work at that level often, for example, log files.
Okay.
So what we thought we'd do today is bring up the what to do when your Roadster gets bricked newsletter. And that is our most popular newsletter. And it guides a customer through what's going on with the car. There are a number of precautions that need to be taken as soon as a Roadster is no longer able to charge. And it's vital that these steps are taken because it will determine whether that battery pack will be able to be brought back to life,
Right.
or whether it becomes terminally ill and simply dies and the car is idled.
Right.
So one of the first things to do was, let's see here, you get that dreaded message on your screen. It'll either say 0 miles, charge immediately, and that's of course what you need
Scary.
to do, or critical brick under voltage fault, and at that point in time, the charge port on the Roadster will no longer accept a charge.
Hey, Pete,
Yes.
can you jump on you're kind of behind the mic when you're turning.
Okay. All right.
Thanks.
So we've got the dreaded message. Of course, before a Roadster gets bricked, and I was going to bring the little death plea beep with us that we could play, but I did not do that. We'll
No.
play that for you at some point in time. The Roadster is very good about alerting you every minute and a half or so, I need something.
Right.
And it will do that for a month or so before it finally says, okay,
I quit.
no longer, yeah. So the first step is put your car in tow mode. Now, the reason this is vital, at the point in time that your Roadster is bricked, it's going to have to get moved.
Correct.
The type of repairs that we do, which is called a battery recovery, we've got 2 different levels, cannot be done in your garage or in your backyard unless you have a lot of equipment like we do. That car is going to have to be transported somewhere, and in order to do that, it makes it so much easier if the wheels are free-wheeling.
Yeah. Free rolling. Yep. Absolutely.
When a Roadster gets bricked, it's in park basically, and it's not like an ice car where you just simply pull the lever into neutral.
Right.
It stays locked. And at this point, Espy might want to elaborate the challenges that we've had trying to get Roadsters here that were locked.
Yes, it's been quite a challenge. We touched base on that on the first podcast, actually. But in case you didn't opt in on that one, it's quite challenging just because it makes it a lot more difficult just because transporters are not familiar with electric vehicles. That's something that it's starting to come as a norm, but it's not there yet. So considering with that, it's very difficult to find a transporter that is willing to take the steps that it will be needed for a car that is not in tow mode because since the rear wheels are locked. It's going to be very difficult to get it out of wherever it is, the garage, the driveway, or wherever the location of the vehicle is. So that's where we bring in a tow company to come and help. Now, if it's free rolling in tow mode, it makes it a lot smoother, and which would be considered a neutral. It will be considered neutral status to where all the 4 wheels are free rolling, and it makes it a lot more easier for the transporter to just load it up onto the carrier. And it's obviously cost efficient for the customer just because we don't have to acquire that extra cost of having to hire a tow company, or at this point carriers or transporters are like, well, this car was difficult, so let me go ahead and rack up the price, which they tend to do, and they're allowed to do that because it's more work than what they have to already do. So yes, putting in tow mode is a huge plus. I strongly suggest doing it before it completely dies on you, or I think you're able to do it even when it's completely dead, correct?
Well, that's something important to talk about. When the Roadster first gets bricked, the screen will still be lit,
Okay.
and the ability to go in and put it in tow mode. If you wait too long, a few more weeks, then it eventually goes completely dead, and you can't get into your screen anymore.
Okay.
Now, there's another way to activate the car, and that gets kind of dicey. You have to put 12 volts in a certain space. You have to wake up the VDS, and we do not recommend that the owners go in there and do that. We've had actually one of them that put the leads on backwards, and it burned up the VMS card. So it's essential that that a brick Roadster is addressed immediately as soon as it's
Yes.
noted. The problem with a locked car also is it's very difficult to get out of the garage, especially if there are other things in the way.
Yes.
The costs go up because now you have to have a tow company and a transporter, both. And oftentimes the transporters, if they're cooperative, will go down to Harbor Freight and get some dollies to help push the car out
Yes.
because those rear wheels are locked. And then getting it onto the transporter is also a chore because you have to winch it up.
Yeah,
You
and
can't push it
there's
by hand.
times where the dollies don't even work at times. So you're spending money on dollies that sometimes are too big for the carrier to fit into their carrier, especially if it's enclosed. Enclosed, they're very strict about the size of dollies that they expect you to have. So it's just a whole bunch of extra activities and thing or money to be put in order to transport the vehicle when the vehicle is not in tow mode. So to avoid all that extra expenses, tow mode is strongly suggested before it completely dies.
The next step is pulling a log file. And this is also very important in that it tells us or Tesla service centers what's going on inside the car. How bad is that battery? How long has it been bricked? Is it a recovery candidate?
Right.
We have two in play right now. We're waiting for the log files to determine whether the customer should pull the trigger and have us
it.
get a transporter to have it brought here. These Roadsters may be too far gone, and you typically don't know that for certain until you get a log file. And the log file will tell us everything we need to know: when it first began reporting problems with it being bricked, what the current state of charge is, if there is any, what the brick voltages are. And again, lithium-ion cells don't like to spend a lot of time under 2 volts DC. The log file will tell us how long it's been under 2 volts DC, and we can then give the customer information to make an informed decision as to whether this car is now worth a recovery process.
At what point is it a safe, okay, what's the voltages that it would be like, okay, this can be recoverable? Like, is it 2 point something volts? Is it?
Well, if it's under 2 volts, and remember, we've had a number of them come in with a varying degree of string voltage
Right.
and brick voltages. Where we get really concerned is if it's been under 2 volts for an extended period of time, and by that I mean 2 or 3 months.
Okay.
So time is definitely of the essence as soon as a Roadster is identified as being bricked. In the old days, customers would have them transported to a service center. They would sit at the service center for a while. Then they would offer them a battery pack replacement. They may or may not have had a battery recovery. We found that so many of these Roadsters didn't get the CPR they needed in time and ended up hard bricked. So today, the service centers are much better. In fact, service centers use our newsletters, and they're much better about taking the precautions. Which brings me into the next item, which is pulling the ESS service disconnect. Once a Roadster is identified as bricked, it's been put in tow mode, and a log file has been pulled. The vital step then becomes pulling that service plug, which stops any further drain on the battery. Now that Roadster can literally wait until a transporter comes along and until it comes to our shop for a recovery. Again, the old days, the service plugs, if they're left in, that battery continues to drain.
Okay.
And it gets worse and worse.
So is it so it is mandatory to get that ESS plug removed, even if it's completely bricked, even if it's at 0 volts?
Once the 2 steps have been done, because once we have the log file, we can then go into the logs and figure out exactly what the condition of the battery is.
So step 1, put it in tow mode. Step 2, pull the log file. Or log file first and then tow mode.
Right. We've got the put your car in tow mode, correct?
Then pull a log file.
Pull the log file
And then remove the ESS plug.
and the ESS plug. Yeah.
Okay. And then where do you access the ESS plug from?
Good question. It is in the most inaccessible place in a Tesla Roadster. It's on the
Of course it is.
rear driver's side, and try as I may, I have been trying for years to be able to pull one of those plugs myself. My arm is too short. My son's arm, on the other hand, is thinner and longer,
Yeah.
and he can do it. What I think half of our guys in the shop can do it, and half can't.
Yeah. I mean, I've even tried at some point, and I feel like my hand was going to get stuck in there. So I just stopped. It's scary.
For those that have no options, you can take the rear wheel off, take out the arch liner, and then it's far more
Remove it that way.
accessible. Yeah, but to do it from the rear definitely requires some contortionist skills.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hidden in there. Is there a reason why it's that hidden? I mean, is it like, doesn't it serve a specific purpose, like a safety purpose, like for the car's health or the car's life?
Everything that's difficult on a Roadster, doesn't seem to make sense, is because the cars needed to be pushed out into the field to keep the company alive. We said in a very early video that it's arguable whether the Roadster really was ready for release at the time that it was put in the field. And again, fortunately, the compromises were not in the areas of safety and performance. They were in the areas of serviceability. You know, for example, to work inside the ESS battery pack requires going up on a lift, dropping a 1,000-pound battery, taking all the suspension components off the rear, or at least most of them,
Yeah.
and then opening up and cracking it open to find wear items like fuses and contactors and you know, parts that normally would be accessible.
Interesting.
So had there been more time, Tesla would most certainly have put access panels and doors in various areas.
Right, because I think that's what they have. I mean, touching on the Model S, I think, believe in the front one, they have like the emergency loop, right? So you can just access it right from the front if you can't open.
Right, and well, even with the Model S, there were some head-shaking things like the battery that's under the windshield cowl.
Oh, that's right.
Yeah,
Yes.
that one is a tough one to get to. Unlike an
That's
ICE
right.
engine where you pop the hood, there's your battery.
Right.
You know, two 10-millimeter bolts or nuts, and you pop
You're
in any
good.
battery. Yeah.
Oh, Lord. So I see people trickling in. So if you guys have any questions of what we're talking about, our topic, or any previous podcasts we've done, and maybe your question was not answered, just please feel free to start asking those questions away.
Can we put up on the screen now the website that shows the newsletters? And before we get into questions, we can show, there we go. All right, so one of the first newsletters, they're actually in order of, well, let's go to the latest one then. Why is Tesla buying back their Roadsters? It was kind of puzzling initially why Tesla would buy their own cars back. This newsletter describes it very nicely. How well are Roadster battery packs aging? This again was something that was only available, this information was only available as these cars aged. And being in the service business, we were able to provide a lot of content for this question. We spoke earlier about the VDS, Vehicle Display Screen, and the error codes. There is a newsletter that has a long list of the various error codes, what they mean and what they're pointing to. And these are available in the log files as well. Then we have age-related failures now manifesting. That was May 14th, 2020. The Pem is going on 12 years, and parts, components are aging, and issues are beginning to crop up. So this newsletter gives a nice dissertation on what kind of challenges these cars are facing as they age. Here's another popular one, buying tips and valuation. We get this question all the time, what's my Roadster
Yes.
worth? I had one this morning, and he said, my God, I just realized from last year to this year, my Roadster has doubled in value. It's just like the Tesla stock, isn't it? Of course, what helps is Tesla is recreating the 3.0 battery pack. During the dark days last year, it was questionable whether there would be a battery solution for a Tesla Roadster, and without one, they would have all been idled, become garage furniture and boat anchors. So that's one of the reasons that valuation has been climbing. The 12-volt battery to trunk relocation. At one point in time with 1.5 Roadsters, there was no 12-volt battery in the Roadster to power all of your 12-volt devices, which are numerous. Headlights, keys, solenoids, all of the lighting in the car. the aftermarket vendors are not making 400-volt devices like this, so everything is still in the 12-volt world. For a while, Tesla was deriving 12 volts from a sheet in the pack, and there are 11 sheets. The problem with that was that pack or that sheet was working harder than the others, so it was prone to earlier failure than the others. So they finally realized to do this properly, we really need to install a 12-volt battery in the Roadster. But they've used up all the real estate. So they found a place underneath the front passenger fender behind the wheel well to place a little motorcycle battery. And like all 12-volt batteries, they need to be replaced. This is an absorbent glass mat battery, which although maintenance-free, in other words, you don't have to pour acid into it, it has a lifespan. And 2 years is typical.
Right.
So every time you need your 12-volt battery replaced, you had to go to a service center, unless you were really adventurous and did this yourself, and spend a few $100s to have this little motorcycle battery replaced. What we came up with was a relocation for that battery. And essentially what we use is a small ammo box that gets mounted in the trunk of the car. We reroute all of the 12-volt feed wires to that box. We put a meter on the box so you can see what the condition of the battery is, and we upgrade the battery. Instead of a 12-volt 8-amp-hour battery, we put a 12-volt 12-amp-hour battery in it, and it is a UPS battery designed specifically for electronic applications like this versus the deep discharge or deep starter battery that was originally in the Roadster. So that's what that newsletter describes: why we did it, the advantages of it, how it works, and
it's
what it
probably
does.
one of our popular services to do. I think almost every Roadster we've had in the shop has gotten this service.
Well, the main advantage is you no longer spend $300 to $500 to get a battery replaced.
Right.
You buy a battery for $40,
Just open it up,
and you
pop
put it
in.
yourself. Yeah.
Yeah.
2 little fast-on tabs, and you're fresh. You've got a fresh battery. The next one is how to wake up a bricked Roadster. And this was when your Roadster is bricked longer than that first few weeks, when it no longer accepts a charge and eventually the screen goes dark. In order to put things in tow mode and get a log file, you have to wake up the Roadster. And this describes one way to do that. You actually have to apply 12 volts on these 2 posts and then work on the VDS screen to temporarily wake up the screen so that you can go into tow mode, get your log file, and then disconnect it again. It does not start a charge on the Roadster. So if it's bricked, it's going to remain bricked, but at least you have access to the screen. Another one that we did, and this is in memory of 3 early Roadster pioneers that were instrumental in the creation of the Roadster and solved a lot of technical problems: Doug Bourne, Brian Finn, and Andrew Ingram. And what this newsletter does is it's basically a tribute. These 3 gentlemen went into a small private plane one Sunday morning, and the plane failed, and all 3 of them perished in that plane crash. And at the time this happened, they were instrumental in a lot of Roadster issues, so it was a huge loss, not only loss of life, but also loss of talent for Tesla. Another newsletter is, oh, by the way, the thing about these 3 guys, buried deep inside the firmware, there is also a tribute to these employees. And in the newsletter, it tells you how to access this obscure part in the firmware, and their 3 names will pop up. So their legacy lives on in the Roadsters, and I think it's only 2.0 Roadsters, though.
2.0 Roadsters.
Verify. Yeah.
Have you tried it on a 1.5?
I haven't, but I'm going to do that as soon as we get done here. Yeah, I forget now. The newsletter tells you whether it's one or both. Pem upgrade and aging issues. There's a lot of things that we pioneered with the Roadster. The insulating material failing,
Yes.
for example. No one knew about that until we noticed it and said, hey, what's going on here? And we began to notice that transistors are shorting and failing. Well, we didn't stop there. As we have been rebuilding PEMs now for many years, other engineering issues came to light. Other retrofits and wear items that that needed to be replaced came to light. And as always, we share all of this information with Tesla and give them feedback,
Right.
which they're very grateful for. So this newsletter talks about all of the things that we have found as the power electronics module ages. And a PEM rebuild, by the way, is the equivalent of an ICE engine rebuild, except it's not mechanical. It's not piston rings and bearings and
all
head
electronics.
gaskets. It's all electronics, but it's equally as vital.
Right.
Skimping on that, and you can end up with some catastrophic failures in a part that hasn't been made for 13 years.
What would be the most catastrophic failure on a PEM? Like,
The worst ones are when the insulating material fails,
okay.
the IGB transistor's short, and you have hundreds of amps and 400 volts running through there, and they don't go quietly in the night. They actually send damaging voltages and signals upstream to the logic and the logic boards that control them. And when that happens, do you remember that one Roadster where we had burnt etches and a chip blew up? And
Yes.
and these are multi-layer boards, by the way. It's not like your old boards where you've got an etch on top and bottom, and you can easily see where your trace burned up or
Right.
evaporated. Because of 8 layers, you have to do an archaeological dig. And with schematics and information and Gruber diagrams scarce, it's very difficult to do that level of repair. So that would be the most catastrophic failure, and that's why you want to stay on top of your proactive PEM maintenance in order to avoid that type of failure. If you blow a fuse, that's fine. You can change that easily.
Okay. Can this car actually blow up?
Well, good question. The one in Europe, there was a capacitor that became resistive to the point where it began to overheat, and it built up pressure, and it actually blew up.
Okay.
The problem with that is a capacitor has metal foil inside it, tightly wound, and when it blows up, you get all of these metal fragments, which are conductive, flying around the inside of your power electronic module with lots of circuit boards, and all that conductive material, as it lands on the boards, can short things and cause even more damage.
Wow. So that's why it's mandatory to at least do a PEM upgrade, to do a PEM upgrade. Because even with the maintenance, I mean, you're not really changing
Yeah.
anything. You're
Sensible is a better word. There are a lot of customers that live with deferred maintenance. Now, that works in a Chevy or Ford where your starter motor, your water pump is
Right.
readily available at AutoZone.
right.
But when you lose a PEM board, there is no vendor that you can go back to and get these types of parts.
Oh, wow.
They have to come out of cars, parts cars, and those are in short supply.
Even capacitors, even all that other electronic stuff. I mean, it's not really easy to find. I mean, you can't
The
just
caps are
go.
easy.
The caps
Yeah.
are easy.
Yeah,
Okay.
because those are aftermarket, and they aren't unique to the Roadster.
Okay.
You know, the 40 microfarad at 400 volt or whatever they
Right.
are fairly common.
Okay.
Cornell de Villiers,
Right.
Sprague still make those types of capacitors.
Okay. Well, that's good. But what
Yeah.
about all the other components? What do you do there?
Well, it's the boards. Yeah, the transistors luckily are still available, although we've been stockpiling because there's
Yes.
some hint that some of these transistors will no longer be in production. Now, there's another
Right.
good topic. What the vendors tend to do is they improve on the design of the original transistor.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that works for new product, but it doesn't work for old product that already has existing circuitry and drivers feeding it, or firmware that is using it. So when you improve the product, you then have to change the driver components often, or the firmware. And again, in a product like this that's been obsolete for 13 years, that's very difficult and expensive to do.
Oh, wow. Okay. So there will be a point where we won't be able to do it anymore, at least not to that extent.
To that extent, or independent companies like us will finally have to bite the bullet and make the hefty investment to recreate product like this. Once the Roadsters are worth 7 figures, that's probably feasible, but even at $100,000 today with 2,000 of them out there, it's just not cost effective for companies like us. We can't see the return on investment. The ROI
Right.
is just not there.
Right.
So what do we have next? I think we've gone through that, what to do when your Roadster gets bricked. So
Yes.
let's keep going.
We'll
Pulling
pull
log files.
Yeah.
This is also a good one. This is used often at the service centers. There's a procedure. There's a certain type of memory stick that you have to use, and then you have to put a file on that in that directory. and you have to name it precisely, upper and lower case. If you skip all of that, you won't get a log file out of the Roadster. So this newsletter gives you exact instructions how to pull your log file. Starman comes home. My son Max is still convinced that they're going to send this car back to Earth because in this article, it was done April 1st in 2018, and it was an April 1st joke. But Max still believes that the car really is coming back, and he badly wants to do a video.
I don't think it's possible. Is it possible?
Well, we have a picture of a gigantic ship that has a huge catcher's mitt. And so the car was eventually going to re-enter Earth's orbit and eventually be caught by this mitt. Now, of course, it would burn up, and
Right.
Yeah, but anyway, don't tell Max.
You won't tell Max.
Brick Roadster battery recovery. Okay, here we go into detail how we recover a battery pack, it's quite a process actually. The newsletter is fairly detailed, and it gives people a glimpse as to what the magic is inside the pack, what an innovative solution it was at the time that it came out, and how it really set the precedent for all the other EV manufacturers thereafter. Roadster paint codes. You're going to get chips, you're going to get some paint problems, and this newsletter gives you all of the paint codes that you will need for the Tesla Roadster to buy touch-up paint or regular paint that's sprayed through a spray gun. The diagnostic screen functions. This is the newsletter, the controversial one, where we showed people how to get into the inner recesses of your Roadster. And there's a glimpse of just some of the screens that are available once they get past the password screen. There's an enormous amount of information about the functionality of the Roadster at that level. There was an early valuation newsletter that we did in 2017. Of course, that all changed by the time we did the next one in 2019. And it's exciting to see that Roadsters are continuing to climb in value and what will happen over the next few years. The Pem Capacitor Failure actually has pictures of the European Roadster where the
really?
capacitor blew up, and you can see the carnage inside that Pem. I don't know how it happened, but the gods were smiling that day. All that conductive shrapnel that was blown throughout the Pem, none of it appeared to have shorted anything or affected anything
Really?
in the Pem, and our European counterpart was able to rebuild this Pem.
Oh, that's good.
And then we have a brief Tesla Roadster history. This shows the original owners and their trajectory to success. It's a newsletter that's nostalgic and interesting, well worth a read. Roadster charge specs and tire tech. We split this newsletter into two different sections. Tires definitely are a constant source of questions. I just answered one this morning from Florida. There are two different types of tires, by the way, on a Roadster. That's why you can't do tire rotation. They have
Right.
16s in the front and 17s in the rear. And there's some conjecture now that there may be a shortage of these types of tires in the future. And someone even mentioned, well, I'm going to stockpile them, which of course is not a good idea because
No.
as tires age, you're going to be putting old cracked tires
Exactly.
onto cars, and you got a safety problem. So we'll just have to see what the tire manufacturers continue to produce.
I'm sure they'll produce something that's equivalent, maybe not exactly to the specs, but
I can't imagine that they're going to stop making 16s and 17s
Right.
based on the millions of cars that have been produced with those tires that
Exactly.
are going to continue to be driven at least until the ban occurs, the ice ban.
right. But I think there'll be some alternative for sure.
Then charging, 120 or 240 volt, we go into the parameters as to what the best charging for a Tesla Roadster is. And we've actually updated this a bit with the continued aging of the ESS battery pack. It's usually in the tips section of our newsletters. So you can preserve your battery and make it last as long as possible. And then we've got, could this be the first Tesla Roadster? Well, are we cutting off there? We've got what's inside the Tesla Roadster battery pack.
Probably overlapped.
Yeah, I think one of them overlapped there. The first Tesla Roadster article was about the AC Propulsion Systems T0 cars. They built 3 of them. It was the car that was used by Martin Eberhard and Mark Tarpenning as a test mule for the Roadster, the whole Roadster idea. They even used the original drivetrain, licensed it from AC Propulsion, and the innovation that that Martin brought to the table was using multi-cell laptop batteries in the car versus the Optima spiral wound batteries. So again, these newsletters are on our website. You can catch them at the top. There's a heading, and it makes good reading. We used to have a lot of customers come through and ask to subscribe to that. Are there any questions that we can entertain so far?
Yes, there's one from John Kramer. He says, has the global computer chip shortage affected the availability of parts needed for repairs?
It has not at our level, since in the Roadster world, these are low-tech old chips. The primary chip shortage problem is related to the newer vehicles that Tesla's building. And there's actually some YouTube videos that have come out recently. I haven't watched them yet, but apparently Tesla has an advantage either in their relationship with their supply chain vendors. In some way, they're able to circumvent and get a distinct advantage over the other EV manufacturers. My guess on that would be scale of economies.
Okay.
The other guys aren't building enough cars to become a serious vendor, whereas Tesla definitely has the lead in terms of volume. So they're going to be foremost and front and center regarding any type of preferential treatment with vendors.
Okay. And then there's one from Solar Power on Demand. Is there a voltage limit for the Roadster motor? Does anyone reconfigure the battery pack to create a very high voltage configuration, 500 volts? Is higher voltage the key to higher performance?
Well, voltage and amperage, of course, have a direct relationship. And yes, if you pump more current through a motor, it's going to increase the power. It's interesting that this question came up because our next video that we're doing next week is about a very special Roadster, one of a kind actually, that we discovered is in our stable of bricked Roadsters.
Okay.
And without giving away all the details, it is an experimental motor, and it is a mutant basically, and we're going to do a full video write-up and performance trials with this Roadster to compare
That should be fun.
it to the existing. Allegedly, this Roadster, and I'm giving away more than I want to
I
at
know.
this point, is a 0 to 60 in 3 second car versus 0 to 60 in 3.7 for the Sport or 3.9 for the regular Roadster. So we're going
So
to
that's
prove or
definitely
disprove
something
that.
to watch. Definitely something to watch.
And early test driving indicates to me, and I drive Roadsters every day, as you know, I'm the test driver here,
Yes.
designated. You can feel it in the seat of your pants. This car is definitely faster and has more power. So
Are the viewers going to see how fast it goes?
Yeah, we'll
Okay.
we'll
right.
do some stopwatch
Okay.
type trials.
Alrighty. All right. Is there any other questions you guys want to go ahead and ask? Please ask away. Do not hesitate. Let's see here. Hello, Pablo Picaro. Happy Tuesday. Let's see here. Nothing so far yet.
Okay. Well, you know what? We could wrap up this podcast then.
Absolutely.
And stay tuned. We will be doing these podcasts every Tuesday at 10 a.m. And I understand there's a Mountain Standard Time and a Daylight Standard Time, DST.
Right.
We are currently DST, the same time zone as PST. But it'll be 10 a.m. PST, DST, and MST.
And please, if this time needs to be changed, I know there's some people from the East Coast that may, I don't know, time is a little bit later or early. Just let us know. We can definitely change the times as well. Please give us input on what works best for you guys.
And the only disadvantage to not being available for the live podcast is you can't ask questions. But these are all posted on our YouTube channel, so if you want to review it later on, you can easily do so at any time.
Oh, we do have one question from Alex W. What got you interested in Roadsters?
Well, in 2013 or so, I wanted to start driving a battery electric vehicle versus a Prius that I had been driving, and wanted to go 100%, and ended up buying a lightning green Roadster, which I thoroughly enjoyed. Drove it for about a year or so, and one of our field engineers walking by my trunk looked inside, asked me about the big black box, the Pem that we showed earlier, and I said it's a three-phase inverter, and he pointed out quite correctly that we repair these. We're in the critical power world, one of our divisions, and we service UPSs and data centers all over the United States. So that was the paradigm shift that got us into servicing Tesla Roadsters. I hired someone within 2 months that had Tesla Roadster service experience, and we began to attract customers fairly quickly because we offered a solution that at the time Tesla did not offer, which was the repair of a power electronic module, which is less expensive than an outright replacement.
Correct.
So that's what got us into the Tesla business, and today we are the premier Roadster repair organization and have branched off into their other platforms, including the Model S's, which are now also coming out of warranty.
Yep. Sure are. Let's see here. Oh, we have another one from John Kramer. Are you aware of any issues with aftermarket power front kits for Model S? Do they cause conflicts with Tesla software?
I have not heard of any problems, and there are a lot of customers that have bought that option and had it installed.
Yeah, I mean, not only that, there's so many aftermarket products that Model S, 3s, and X customers have done to their car, and so far we haven't seen any of it being rejected by the software or any of that sort. Usually these aftermarkets are firmware friendly.
Yeah, or they're cosmetic, doing the front, I forget what they call that now, where they replace the whole front end.
The
of the model.
facelift?
The facelift
The
version, yes,
facelift,
or
yes.
the spoiler in the back.
Yeah, so nothing with firmware or software related, so usually it's all good. Yep. Any more questions, guys? Might just wrap this up here a little bit early.
Well, again, thank you for joining our podcast. I'm Pete Gruber.
And I'm SB Valladares.
Yes, and we'll see you next week. Feel free to email us or look at our YouTube channel
Yes.
for any more information that you may be interested in. And, of course, our website, grubermotors.com.
Yep.
Thank you.
Bye.